Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Healing and Freedom Journey. Mark and Melissa de Jesus in the house.
And your shirt.
It is very red.
People have been loving your shirts that you've been wearing on Sunday, by the way.
It's fun.
Yeah. I was so excited when I went to the store and you were like, can you check and see? And there was like all these new kind of, well, we're calling them Hawaiian, but are they Hawaiian?
This one isn't necessarily Hawaiian. It's more just very sunny, though. Very Arizonian.
It is actually. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you, babe.
By popular demand, we're back for a part 2. Mm-hmm. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.
Yep.
We are here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really interesting because our journey has involved a lot of things, teaching and you and I have done a lot of things together. This podcast we've been doing for years. And what people give us the most feedback about is the vulnerability.
Right.
And the honest sharing, the expression of what we're growing through as we're helping others. Mm-hmm. And so we're here for a part 2 because many of you have written back. Some have even said, one person in particular wrote and said, do part 2, 3, 4.
Aw.
And that's refreshing, but there's still a part of me that has a hard time letting that fully sink in, because there's a part of me that it's like, well, people want the teaching, they want help and this. And so when I share the vulnerable places of, I'm still processing, still growing, still, working on all kinds of stuff. And people will write, overwhelmingly, thank you for the sharing of that part of your journey. Thank you for that. And overwhelmingly, I get emails about you and your sharing and your, which you do such a great job of. I'm still in the process of letting that sink in. And I know, and I teach it. I think vulnerability is powerful. I see sometimes where it's used in ways that are not helpful, not very redemptive, but nonetheless, I value it. I value, like, we're all growing in this. And I'm still learning to go, to let it sink into my heart.
Which part? That people actually care, or that you're safe to share? Like, what do you?
I think that I've grown my whole life where the emphasis of I feel loved and I belong is based on me doing things right.
Right. And
the religious perfectionism started at a very early age, where it's that's the basis of how we relate. So those things, if they hit the mark, if Mark hits the mark, then there's applause, then there's feedback. But to be loved as I am in my journey of still figuring things out, still growing, still healing, still on the journey, there are places where I'm still recognizing, the vulnerability is the powerful place. Yeah. It's not just here's what you've learned where you've overcome. It's these. So that trickles into everything. It trickles into where people appreciate just even just our banter and just how we relate to each other.
Right.
So,
well, I think we're cool. So
yeah. I think we're funny too. People don't really always get the fullness of that.
I know. Right.
But
we do like to laugh a lot.
That's what really, one of the things that really bonded us together was we laugh about the same things.
Let me just pause there for a second, because I do not understand people that are married and they do not have the same sense of humor. How do you stay married? If you and I didn't think the same stuff was funny.
Right.
That was so big for me and you.
Right. I think there's a place where I can take a joke and run it into the ground. And there are places where you'll start. Okay.
Not really anymore.
I do have a tendency of doing that, where it's
you used to.
I just keep it going.
Yeah, I don't think anymore, but gosh, I love that we can laugh together.
I do too. Mm-hmm. I do too. And I think
that's my tip for marriage.
Laughter's been a big part of the healing journey too, because I can get so doggone serious about what I need to work on and what people need to work on. And so anyways, I appreciate all the great feedback from people, and it's healing for me in my renewal, because I stand for people knowing who they are in Christ, walking in that authentically, stripping off performance, stripping off perfectionism. And I feel like I've been in a big season where this religious perfectionism, maybe it's because of my OCD work with people, like I just see it and it's bringing it out in me more too, where I'm like, this thing has been tied to me since I can remember having a pulse and talking,
right?
You know? So where do we begin in part two? Or maybe I already...
I think you just started, to be honest with you. I think you should just keep it on trucking.
So I think many people relate to this, many don't. But I wanted to say that, like, I'm letting it sink in. I think that I've always had this voice that I'm learning to let God heal, that at times says, you're sharing too much. People don't really care. You know, why do you just get on with it.
Right.
You know, and I think that's a normal thing that you go through, and but I'm really finding the beauty in the vulnerability like never before. And when last time I talked about one of the struggles being energy, and there's so many different areas and facets of how energy affected me. And if I was to kind of look at like what is a big place of healing for me, I would say bullseye, you know, right square, the target is religious perfectionism. That there's like a new layer over these past years that I find it being brought to the surface in a new way, where I see it and I see why I have been so connected to it over the years, and I'm shedding it layer by layer, because as a kid, it brings me back to my childhood, because from the earliest of ages, I remember the feedback I got from people was things I did on stage. At times it was acting. I did a lot of I did theater, I did artistic stuff and drama and things like that. And I have some video clips.
And maybe puppets in there too.
It did puppets. Oh yeah, you grew up in church. Anybody out there in children's ministry know how to do puppets, right? I even went to puppet training. Anyways, you go through where when you don't understand unconditional love, and you're not like, I wasn't mentored in my emotions and all those things, all the stuff that we talk about. So the performer came on very early because I would get feedback from that. But then it was like the stakes were always high. So I would get incredibly anxious, incredibly nervous. I would have full-blown panic attacks anytime I was asked to speak in any kind of setting. Even if it was just, hey, get up and share a testimony, or get up and do the announcements, I would have an overwhelming anxiety and a pressure. And looking back, I can see where as a kid, the stakes were high. If I mess this up, I will not be loved. I wasn't consciously thinking that, but it fuels that nervousness. It fuels that I got to make sure everything's just right. So the perfectionism comes in, and a lot of my family hypnosis, so to speak. When I say hypnosis, I mean like just the
mindset,
the mindset that kind of floats around.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm not talking about hypnosis when I'm like you
right.
getting
They
sleep
were hypnotizing
or whatever. It's more like the mindset that floats through is you know, God is holy, and you better make sure your heart is right. So I could be in a setting where I'm playing basketball with some friends, and somebody say to me, hey, you're giving a sermon in church, and dreaded fear would come in.
Right.
And whatever I was enjoying playing basketball, it was gone, because now I was dreading it. And then that bled into a lot of things. I played basketball in high school. I was constantly anxious at every practice, because practices were hard. Our coach really worked us physically. It was very intense for me as a guy who, I had the brain and the smarts for sports, but wasn't the fastest, wasn't the most agile. And so I would dread it. And I would obsess and spin over it. Same with soccer practice. I played on a soccer team. So everything that I put my attention to got filled with that. Fast forward, then I get into ministry at a young age. I'm preaching when I'm a teenager, you know. So this strange thing that happens with perfectionists is you get locked in this feedback loop that you get stuck in. And it is you're under this high pressure, but you produce things people like and they applaud you, and it gives you this reward feedback that you stay stuck in. So then the pressure increases.
Right.
You
Do
know,
better every single time. Oh, outdo yourself.
so I give a sermon and people were like, oh my goodness, that's fantastic. Like that touched my life. It was so great. So now it's like, what I hear is, man, next time I got to really show up. That's exhausting, you know? And I think there is a sadness that there was no voice in my life about, hey, you don't have to live with that pressure. I see you under pressure. You know, you don't have to live with, I don't ever remember a moment in time where that was ever even like brought up in my journey. And so, even when I was pastoring, you're going to preach on this date, whatever date you give me from now until then, I'm spinning about it. I'm like, it's got to be on point. It's got to be just right. A lot of anxiousness. I'd be practicing it. I'd be, all those things are fine. Practicing a sermon's fine. Lots of preparations, fine.
Right.
It's the spirit behind it. I was like under duress, and it was like, it would just steal joy out of my life. So, I'm trying to think of where I'm going with this.
No,
so fast forward.
Go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
No, I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but it also, even as you're talking, it's making me think about, even especially nowadays, how much people get attacked and accused. Preachers is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. You were moving into a culture of things going online, people being able to give opinions and things like that, of being able, you have to cover everything and make sure you have everything you're preaching and teaching in a reference, and you have to make sure you get it all right so that,
Yeah.
That's adding right.
I'll definitely get to that. I'll fast forward to when you and I left the church I was working at. We got married. We started a new ministry all over, and within that time period, we shepherded and pastored a church for a season, and it was an extremely stressful time probably in every area of our life. And I found myself getting free out of a revelation of like the Father's love, understanding my thoughts, working through things. Like my whole ministry focus was shifting, right? But in the midst of like pursuing that, I felt my internal life was like really getting raw and really struggling because it was painful. There was a lot of seasons of just hardship and struggle. And I responded to that by like ramping up the RPMs again. The RPM, kind of, for those of you who don't know cars, when you hit the pedal to the metal, it goes, and I had let go of that and I felt it ramping up now again. Mm-hmm. And so even when we had our church, you'd see me, I would be giving these messages, and then it'd be like an hour and a half, 2 hour message.
It would.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was
they were great.
Okay, yeah.
Here's the thing.
I was going to say, I didn't want to say it's great and just be in my own world about it.
People loved it, but it was getting to a point where people loved it, but it was exhausting too, because you were fire hosing people. And it was at that point really raw for you on making sure you covered everything because you didn't want to be misunderstood. And not being understood, being misunderstood came off of the last church too, because we had so much there was, when Mark says about the pressure around it and all this stuff, it was awful with the gossip and all that stuff when we left the church that you were on staff at. So that then I think bled into when we're pastoring our own church a couple of years later of, no, I need to make sure what I'm saying comes across so I'm not misunderstood. Yeah,
that was my response to trauma.
Right.
I gotta keep my blank together. Like I gotta make sure this is right, because I hadn't experienced that kind of pain up until that point. I had my pain and brokenness from upbringing, but it was like, this was a whole new level of stuff. And so you're in the middle of like trying to shepherd people, and there's all these people coming from different areas of the region wanting, I mean, there's some people that would drive an hour or even more just to attend. They were getting help and healing for their hearts. But meanwhile, I'm wearing out. I'm like, this is tough. So you would say, like, Mark, that was so amazing today. But that was like 6 messages. Like you don't have to do that.
You don't have to cover it all.
Right? I didn't believe you. I'm like, there's an unction from, because this was another interesting thing too. I felt to show up to church and just kind of, as we were like in our gatherings, this is make some people really nervous, but I didn't feel this sense to have a fully prepared sermon. Mm-hmm. I felt I just go full, and during our time of worship, you'll kind of sense where to go, and that frightened me. But then all of a sudden these things would bubble within me. And they were very timely words. They were great. So there's a mixture in this, because sometimes we look at things in black and white. Oh, it was too much. No, it was great. But there was this broken little boy that was like still trying to be like, am I good enough? Right? And that's how God works. It's like a mixture. It's like really good stuff, but broken stuff. Mm-hmm. You know? All those of you, whatever church you attend, your pastor is that. Like really some great stuff. And like, there's this brokenness coming through.
Right.
And don't say it's not, because it is. Everybody has it. And on some days it's more one than the other, you know, especially when they start getting angry and yelling at the congregation.
Right.
And they've had it, you know. So when we moved on from that, and then I found myself doing a lot of one-on-one work with people. Mm-hmm. I started to see this ratchet up in that setting, because I felt like, wow, like people are coming to me with big burdens, and they're like, we heard that you help people and you have great results. And it was like these things would be thrown in front of me, and my answer to everything at the time was like, yeah, okay, yeah, because I greater is he that's in me. And it dismissed, like, no, these people got to work on their issues, right? And all this weight and pressure
for you to have answers for people and teach them and help them to get free.
And to have like a dynamic, 50 or 60 minute, like heaven come down. So it would just take a few of those sessions and I'm so exhausted and so tired.
Right.
And it took me a while to realize that self-pressure was just wanting to come up in so many different ways. And so in each of these stages, it's taught me, A, that's how I lived to survive. And B, like, I'm going to have to learn how to see the weaknesses and the ordinary. Because in perfectionism, like, you want everything, like God just have this amazing moment and amazing meeting, and everyone just feels so filled. And then you don't appreciate just the ordinary, of just getting together and singing or sharing and seeing the beauty in that.
Well, it goes to the video that you just did the other day, a couple of days ago, on mental health and the prophetic.
Right. On
just people, God using ordinary people and you appreciating a special, even just I don't even want to use the word special, but an innocent interaction of just simple affirmation and love is perfect. That is special. That is beautiful. And we dismiss those things because they're not like these woo-woo moments,
There was a time where I was actually working, and at one short little stint, I even traveled briefly with a guy who was, his main thing was prophetic ministry. And it was interesting because I had my own flair of like how I would pray over people and how I would minister. It wasn't exactly like what they would do. But then I felt this like pull to like be like them, because I'm still not sure who I am is okay in all this. Right. And
we were rubbing up against a lot of pretty famous ministries that we were going, is this our fit? Is this where we're meant to be? Is Correct. This who we're meant to team up with?
Right.
And then you're wanting them. I know a lot of people can relate to this, especially when you go to conferences and stuff. You want them to look at you and go, I see you have something. I see you're special. I see you,
Right. Like have them just call you out and,
right.
and give you a sense of significance. Okay, God does see me.
Right.
God does work.
Right.
And I remember when I was in the midst of all this, so going with this particular guy, great guy, great heart. And, but I'm still trying to figure out like, what is my flavor? Mm-hmm. So coming off of that, something I did or whatever, somebody had, like we want to have this guy, Mark, come to so this ministry. Now it was interesting that, it didn't work out. Scheduling didn't work out. I actually was going to be somewhere else, but this ministry wanted me to come, and they were this kind of ministry gathering where you have somebody speak and then everybody in the place lines up and you have to give prophetic words for everybody. And I'm on the phone with this guy. Like, I'm like, I don't operate that way. You know, I don't, and whatever people feel about it is whatever they feel about it, but I don't operate that way. And that was I remember that moment being like, okay, God, you've wired me with some things, but people are pulling on me this way. Right. And it's a real interesting dilemma to find yourself in. And I've been in this like tug of war of like, no, I want to do this, but it's not like that. Right. So it's like, oh, you do one-on-ones. You're a counselor. You book sessions, right? Like, no, I'm not a counselor that books sessions all the time. That's not my main thing I do. You know, I'm constantly like fighting. In the meantime, there's this pressure that keeps weighing on me to have like these dynamic results.
Right.
In these moments. And I've gone through rounds where I've had to keep letting go of that pressure. And ministry is chock full. It's one of the things that really concerns me about modern ministry. It is you gather together and it's like ministers, pastors, like they just vomit these like stories of how great and amazing their church is and all these things.
And the numbers.
And it's like the fish is this big kind of, stuff. And it's like, sometimes I want to go, hey, what do you do for fun? Like I want to jar them out because it's like we're in this hypnosis is a great word. We're in this hypnotic, like God is doing great things, other things, and we got great numbers. And I want to sometimes say, who cares? Who cares? How are you doing? How's life?
It is shocking sometimes that it's still going on like this.
Yeah,
it is shocking. Because we are in a culture where people are desiring people, they're so real. Oh, I love it. That's why Instagram is so, I mean, even though it's like real, but it's not, whatever. That's a whole rabbit hole. But people want to see into people's lives, the realness of their lives. But in church, man, we have still such a performance thing.
Yeah, we do. And we feel the need to really pep rally people to really get this like, it's like we're constantly advertising to them and we got to like promote it and get branding and it's this machine. And sometimes I want to go, I know things aren't going that great for you. You can just share that with me. It's all right. And I know you feel like you have to, cause I know that feeling of like, I got to show up and I got to produce, or it's yawn. You know, at times, a lot of this is, we're building a ministry. It's livelihood. We're like, we need provision in certain areas. So then that provision ties in with like, I better really step up because then I won't. It's just a mess to get wrapped up in. But I think that what it's led me to over the years is, you mentioned like online content and stuff like that, and that's the place I wanted to get to, although I could go back and share even more stories, is when you move from where I'm used to being in a room and talking with people, there's a thing of like, you build relationship, you know them, and you're teaching, you're making eye contact and so forth. And I've always had this dream of building online content, which is what, we're doing now. And I really, it's something that I really enjoy, but there's also this monster that comes up at another level of this religious perfectionism. And you touched on it, because we live in a culture now where you present something and it's put out. It's not like a room of people in the church. It's like now put out to the world and anyone's opinions. So I feel that it wants to really ratchet the perfectionistic back up to like make sure that what I'm saying is like really on point. I'm dealing with mental health subjects. You better know what you're talking about, right? Then there's this like this world that disturbs me of Christian criticism around theology. Like I get disturbed just reading how people comment about other people, not me, about other people. Right? Where I go,
Scary.
yeah. First of all, like what you're saying is not really, like you don't really know that person you're accusing. That's really out of context. And B, the spirit behind the way that you're coming across is like, wow. I remember being on, when I was first starting to blog, I remember going online and there was an article about one of the famous, healing preachers. And it was just trashing him, and just in every way. And I was like, reading through, I'm like, I can hear some of his points, but I felt it's
yucky.
It was yucky. It was like, they were just pouring poison all over him. And I just got upset in the moment because all the comments were like, yeah, they're high-fiving. And I was like, I just said a comment of like, why are we being so harsh and mean? It was something to that kind of, it just bothered me the way people were coming across. And because I don't like the way Christians handle famous preachers or speakers. I feel like we're not aware of our own stuff. And the way that we come across it just reveals what's the word? Guile.
That's a good word.
That's there. And then they hit back at me. And I was like, get out, abort, abort. Okay. So I share all that to say it has built up this thing where that messes with me. It wants to mess with me in like when I teach and preach scripture or insights about mental health, it can make me too aware of like being misunderstood. And then that goes back to my childhood. Let's just be honest. It goes back to my childhood because I always felt misunderstood. And that wound wants to rise up because I feel if I just explain to you correctly, you'll understand me. And I've had to learn the hard way that
never, ever works. Ever.
Right. It makes it worse. And then you lose your peace and you lose the beauty of your journey. So I remember even in the early stages on YouTube, like I'd put videos on, I turned the comments off.
We did.
Because I was like, I can't handle this. Even to this day, I can only handle so much of social media because I go in there and I it's like I feel some of the things people are saying and it's so ugly.
Yeah, that's why we're not on there.
And that may change at some point.
Right.
And who knows? But I said, okay, there was one, I don't know her name, but there was one lady, somehow the comment, I think I turned it back on. And a lady commented and said,
yeah, I know what you're
I don't remember the exact statement. I don't remember what video it was, but she said, I really want to encourage you to turn the comment on. And if people are like, it was basically this premise. If people are mean or off, we got your back.
Right. She was like, let us defend you.
So in that moment, that was
made you want to cry.
That was the first time like a YouTube comment made me want to start crying because it was like, I've got this scared boy in me that's still getting healed. You understand the metaphor I'm using here.
Yep.
I'm not saying a literal little boy. Okay.
Right.
It's like that I'm healing through and letting that area of my life be strengthened and be able to walk at new layers of like communicating, sharing what I need to share, recognizing, yes, you can be misunderstood. Even to this day, there's plenty of people, even people that have OCD or anxiety or whatever, like, oh, you said this and it spun me out. And the old version of Mark would have to, well, let me explain, right? And I'm letting that go because it's a bad trail. But it started when I started to like really dive into mental health areas. I felt like that's wanted to ratchet up more. And you noticed it too, where I started getting nitpicky. I started spinning about certain things I needed just right, because it was like, I'm talking about mental health, and it like put this like white coat around me that I need to like be something.
Right.
And that's why in my broadcast, I say, it's your brother from another mother. Now it sounds kind of funny, but really that's my reminder.
Right.
That's my reminder that I'm your brother. And that's the most powerful place I can live in, is being a brother in Christ, because I forget. And then I go into whether it's like mental health and like, do you know, I mean, I know a lot of stuff about mental health. I enjoy it. I've learned a lot and I have a lot to offer, but I'm not an MD, PhD. Oh, I am an MD. I am an MD, Mark DeJesus.
You are an MD.
I'm not a PhD. I'm not any of that. And it's interesting how God has used that in my life in a way that he's like going to show his greatness through just my journey. And there are times where people are like, oh, I appreciate your theology, you know? And I'm like, like,
right.
I have to be aware of like that pressure that like all my doctrine has to be like just right. And all these things I teach on. So now I'm in a season where I feel like I'm becoming more comfortable to talk in a way that is allowing the weaknesses, flaws,
okay, so
to flow through. And I can get into the details of that.
Well, I think this is are you all right over there? I think this is a good opportunity right now, because we've talked about this in the past, to where this has affected us on the podcast.
Yeah. There's something about,
yeah, it has.
Yeah. There's something about this that's very beautiful, but it also, it puts a awakening of areas that I need to grow in. Like it pokes at things, because when I do solo videos, it's like it's my own world. I kind of, can
control it.
Control it. Right.
Right. So I'll just interject. You and I are very different.
Correct.
In the way that we communicate, in the way that we study things, teach things.
Right.
You are a preacher and a teacher, and I am not.
Right.
I'm not Mark. I've probably had a little bit of a battle with that sort of pressure. I would say it was at its heightened when we had our church, because I would open service and things like that. And I felt the pressure to make it be special, because we were having such special gatherings. So I had a pressure on me to make it really special, the worship amazing every single week. And I would look to you for approval. Well, that's a whole other story, but
no, that's a good story, because then I would be in my own world of pressure, consumed with making sure I'm hearing God, doing things just right. So it made me not like present with you.
No, and you were like basically dismissive almost, because you were
like, you're
so
fine. You're fine.
You're fine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's not telling me the truth.
Right. And and I'll say this. I would tell you, I'm not trying to make you like me, but I feel like the way that the culture was going,
the setup was,
it was kind of still pulling that out.
Right. Because I think too that people have an expectation that if I'm your wife, like even in the beginning, you were a worship pastor and all those things, like, oh, does she sing, play piano? No. Right. I have a horrible singing voice. Horrible. So it is meant for the car alone, and that is it. But so I have had to like wrestle with that, because I think I mentioned it in the last podcast, like, well, who am I in the midst of this, right?
Yeah.
In joining you and becoming one and us doing this. And so when we started the podcast too, you were really wrestling with a lot of this, because I can say things sometimes very flippantly, sarcastically, And people can take it like I'm being snotty or I'm being dismissive about, and I'm not. I do have a sarcastic personality that I like. Sometimes I've gone, well, do I really want to be? Yeah, I like to be sassy sometimes. So that has become, I shouldn't say become, we had our challenges in it of, and you can speak to it of like, oh, what's Missy going to say?
Yeah, because...
And you having fear, I'm like, are you prepped? Are you ready in years past?
Yeah. Where I would have this self-pressure of like, okay, here's some things I want to talk about. Here's some things I want to go through. And you would come in much more like not stressed out about it. Like you're coming in like, hey, we're going to have a great conversation. And then I would do a lot of teaching and you would bring in great stories and it was a great combo, but there was this aspect, right? I need to relax still. There's still a place where I need to relax in who I am, knowing that I'm loved as a son. I'm loved in Mark, who he is. I'm not loved because I'm saying something right. And that, if you want to hit at the bottom nerve of the core of what God's been healing me in, it's that. Because my life journey has been surrounded with doing things right and helping people. And many of my relationships, tend to go in that direction. And I get it. I understand, people like, so without going on too many tangents, but I've had to learn to appreciate, because when you came on the podcast many years ago, our early episodes, they're not even
we took them all down.
We rebooted everything and we wanted to go into like new material and I realize in one sense, like it makes me uncomfortable because you are different than me. Right. And so you would say things and I would go,
you would almost get like,
I would scan how a person could take that the wrong way. And it would like create anxiety. And then it would bring out the old OCD fixer of like, what do we do about that? And
then you would be on that thought for the rest of the podcast. And I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And then we'd finish the podcast and you were just in a tailspin.
Yeah. Pretty bad too, because I was like, I had the pressure between like making sure that we're presenting ourselves well. We're a ministry and we need to make sure we're presenting ourselves well. Then there's the religious, you're anticipating religious kickback and even like mental health subjects, make sure we get everything right. And I realized even in some counseling work that of me getting counseling, that this like sense of like, you need to move towards this awkwardness and you need to embrace it. Because there would be moments where like, there's one moment where I was talking about a verse.
This is so funny. Mark did not think it was funny. However, I thought it was funny.
Okay. Yeah.
This is real, folks. This is what happens.
Are you sure we want to do this?
Yes. Just share it.
So when I was talking about...
Hey, listen, if no one watches and no one cares, at least this is therapeutic for us. You're watching a real life therapy session happening.
That's true. That's true. I'm
fine with it.
Yeah, we were breaking down a scripture and I spontaneously brought out a scripture and you said something about the scripture.
My mind was on something else. Okay.
and you said something about the scripture
that had nothing.
And my theological training was like, that's not what the scripture's saying. What do I do right now?
Yeah, I don't know what I was looking at.
It's okay because it doesn't matter.
I interpreted it different.
But in me, it like went right through me where like
that everybody watching it was going to pick up on it and think I was stupid or whatever, and it was going to make us look bad. What was it?
That it would reflect on us. That it would go back to the pain of my pain and then us as a couple, what we've been through and being misunderstood.
And not validate.
Being misunderstood. Because, not to add on to all these things, one of the challenges in our journey is like you and I, we've had to feel like to over-explain what we've been through, what we're going through, and why we are where we are, what's happening, right? And that just inflames obsession. It inflames compulsive talk, And So yeah, in that moment, it's like everything collides at once.
Right.
And knowing what I know about OCD, knowing what I know about perfectionism, I'm like, and you and I have had many talks about it because it made it a bit annoying for you.
Let me tell you, because I can react, and I've had to work on this too, where this, not so much recently, I would be done thinking, we're great. It was great. And you're like, listen, can we just talk about this? And I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done. I can't take the pressure. I can't take it. I just need to be myself. I can't take it.
Right. And that's very humbling for me because it was showing me, okay, there's many great things that we talk about in the podcast, but God is clearly leading us into more being comfortable with ourselves. And it is calling me to be okay, to be a brother, and to let those, so like even if you notice, the majority of the videos that we produce, it's a click and click, meaning we start recording, we finish recording. There's very little edit. I mean, unless something happens, or we've had mics go out or something weird, or if I do a solo video on the whiteboard, I might cut it just to make it.
Or our kids come through the door.
or
our
kids walk in.
Right.
Those bloopers would be funny.
Right.
And so that's intentional because it's like, I don't want it to be just this polished thing. So I want it to be that powerful vulnerability, but at the same time, there are broken areas in me that fight that and struggle with it. And I don't have a lot of models for it. I don't have a current model that I look to and go, yeah, that's an example that we look at. I really don't. I think there's plenty of examples you could talk about in the secular world where people do that. And there's things where we go, we wouldn't want to talk that way. That's not who we are.
Right.
So we're venturing into something that is can at times be frightening. Because I go, man, share that is, am I going to be all right? But facing that is very freeing.
It totally is.
Very freeing. In fact, the last episode, I felt like something rattled in me. And I told you, I said, I think I had a breakthrough in our I didn't even know it. Because I had this idea about us sharing. And
I was like, hot dog. That is from the beginning.
Yeah.
I am his second Holy Spirit. I'm just,
And then that night, this is back at the other episode, the first one. That night, I had like some crazy dreams that I woke up like. So I was like, okay, I'm on, like fearful dreams.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm on to something here. I'm on to something. Mark's on like, Mark 5.0, kind of thing going on here.
You know what though? Am I interrupting you? I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I think has been very precious about our marriage and your journey that I'm very grateful for, and I like to share these things, that your pursuit, and I've shared this, the pursuit of your heart and healing and wherever we have to grow in these areas, you do it. You put the work in. And even if it takes time or months, and I've allowed you to do that too.
Yeah. You have.
I feel like that the Lord has really taught, we'll do marriage stuff down the road, but I feel like the Lord has taught me and how to honor you and pray for you and let you work through that and vice versa with each other and what that looks like, because we do it differently. But when you are growing through those things and healing yourself, there is something so precious that then heals over me that I want to give you credit for. Because as we're doing the podcast, like I shared last week, I'm still trying to figure out who I am. And the more and more that you've been just loving and accepting of me and that, it's made me okay with it.
Yep. Because that's.
Do you want to cry?
Yeah.
I can tell.
Yep. Because it's the real life of like learning to love you. And I realized there are so many areas I get pressured over, and that pressure would leak out in how I would interact.
Yeah.
And I needed to like release our journey of growth to God. And like, listen, we're in a place where people watch our content and view. Like if we had 0 views every week for, 5 years, I'd go, okay, I guess.
No, but
so people our lives are being changed.
Right.
but it's a very, it's a weird thing where it's like lives are being changed. So then you kind of go, well, I better keep making sure and God's going, nope, nope, nope. It's me.
Right. It's
me doing it. It's me doing it. So be yourself and watch it's like when I bumped into a kid from when I was a youth pastor, and I bumped into him years later in Walmart, and I'm just doing my thing. I bumped into him, and he said to me, we had a little conversation. He said to me, there was a message you gave me that really blessed my life. And I was like, okay, I had my top 10. Was it, which one, right? And there's still an aspect of that today where I go, oh, that was a really good one. People are really going to get, I felt great. I felt focused. I was in my lane. I felt like I was clear, right? And he goes, he mentions the message. And it was a message I gave on spiritual gifts. And at the time in my journey, I had no clue what I was talking about. I remember I was like, I do not know how to even I was in my early 20s. I was teaching on I think it was prophecy and because the curriculum we were using a curriculum, and it went to the gifts. So I was like sweating my whole way through it. I had no idea what I was talking about. He goes, that night, God really spoke to my heart about how I need to use what he's given me to bless people. And I'm like, and to this day, people would be like, you know what really helped me?
Not the one I think.
Yeah. I'm like the one.
Not the one I think.
I'm like the one that was like, I was focused. I was right on point. No, it's the one where I was half confused, losing track of thoughts, having a little bit of a rough day, didn't sleep that great the night before, but I'm doing my best upload. Yeah, that one, touched my life. And it was even the same in our episodes where it was like, yeah, I'm struggling a bit with how, we'll just let her rip. And Mark, Melissa, thank you so much.
Right.
This is a very interesting, so it's the more I face it, facing the people who write me emails and they want to tell me all their doctrinal theological history and this, and people who are obsessed with calling out false prophets. It seems Christians are obsessed with that.
So obsessed with it.
And then they're
find a hobby.
Gosh. They feel like they need to correct everyone that they disagree with, and even though they don't even know them and have no relationship with them. I have to be willing to that's my healing. I facing that's going to be there, and that's part of the journey, and you'll be misunderstood. And yes, we live in a world where you put out a video and the whole world can see it, which is that's an adjustment because it's a
good analogy about that too.
Yeah. It's like a pastor getting up to give his message before his congregation. And when he gets done, every person in the congregation files one by one, grabs the mic and gives their opinion about it. It's like, we would go, well, that's insane. Well, that's what we're living in right now.
Right. Is
you present something and everybody can say what they want to say, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of things that I'm working through. One is a lot of the things I talk about need context, right? Should a Christian take medication for mental health? I need an hour to answer that.
Yeah.
So somebody catches me in a segment without that, they're going to totally take me the wrong way. And I have to accept that. I have to accept that. Mm-hmm. I have to accept that something I say or whatever, or 10 years from now, what I teach will probably have enhancements to it. I hope they will.
Right.
I don't see myself just saying the same thing over and over again. It's going to be renewed, refreshed. It's going to be enhanced, right? So I have to give myself permission to grow in the journey. And the posture of humility causes us to go, I'll face it. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to necessarily defend myself all the time, or I don't need to follow that impulse to make things just right, which is.
And be accepting that I won't say things perfect.
Yeah. So it's like welcoming that.
Right.
And I would tell you, I'm struggling, but I'm welcoming this because this is where we need to go.
Right.
And we're not taking that for granted. Like, oh, we just say whatever we want and we just don't. It's this.
Which I've had to, because I can get angry where I want to kind of rail against the machine of like, do it totally opposite. And I have had to go, okay, Missy, chill.
Yeah.
Like that little rebellion in me of do it completely the other way, you know?
Yeah. And at the same time, what you're saying has some good weight to it and some importance, right? And so it's like,
thanks, babe.
So it's true. Well, it's true. So like, and I realize too that people are, the feedback's been helpful because there are people say, Mark, I appreciate how you respond to what Missy was sharing. And I was like, sometimes I'm focused on like making sure my words of what I'm saying are okay.
Yeah.
And I don't realize they're picking up on the love that I have for you and the respect that I have for your journey.
Which is why we started this podcast to begin with, that
right.
we're told by people and we love our at-home kitchen talks and what those look like and the people who have been invited into those and how much that's just been a blessing. So we started the podcast out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been the heart, and we've at times been more teachy. And,
right.
And I think we do have a great tag
balance.
Team where here's a subject. Let's kind of teach and talk through it. But I think the heart is finding that let's just have a conversation here. Mm-hmm. And God's in it.
100%.
Is there anything that
No, I think that I'll share next week or next time.
I felt the same way.
Yeah.
I was like, we were going to both share. So, well, that means there's a part 3.
Mm-hmm. Part 3 is coming.
And we may do it every other week. We'll see.
Yeah.
Or next week.
And this is that goes into the beauty and the brokenness in our life of, we have 2 kids, one with special needs that needs a lot of attention and redirection. Mm-hmm. And we make which is what we've come from in the past of it was the pressure of get it done on this day every week and get it done. And now we go, okay, can we make it happen this week?
Yeah.
If we don't, we don't. If we can, let's do it.
We do look at it like week to week, like, okay, this week.
For my sanity and my heart health too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had 4 or 5 storms and flooding and all this stuff.
And the town was cutting trees around with what I thought was a transformer coming through the woods to just gobble me up, quite frankly. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Literally.
We sat down to film.
Like a transformer is coming through the woods.
We sat down to film, and all of a sudden,
no, it was the craziest noise I've ever heard.
And we were like, "What is going on?" Went outside, and they were going through the entire neighborhood with these giant machines, like transformers.
They were tree eaters, and it was scary. Okay.
So we go, okay, guess we're not filming right now. We'll do it another time.
Oh, goodness.
I pray that you've been blessed, and I do pray that some Christian perfectionists out there get some freedom out of this today.
Yeah.
But
listen, if it was not good, I think it was great for us.
I did too.
I know, babe. Somebody laughed at when I commented, speaking of babe, in the mental health and prophetic ministry, I put, gosh, this is so good, babe. And someone commented underneath it. They're like laughing that clearly I'm the only one that's going to write babe to you in the comments section.
That's great.
Oh, goodness.
That's great. Well, we pray this is a blessing to your journey.
Thank you, everyone.
If it is, you can consider supporting it or get access to there's tons of free stuff out there you can just get a hold of. But if you'd like to take some next step, there's books, there's courses, and you can also donate to support this work. We're really trying to encourage out of our own journey people to experience greater healing and freedom. So until next time, this is your brother from another mother and your sister from
another mister.
We'll see you all next time. We love you.